I knew something was wrong the moment I turned onto my street and saw the concrete trucks parked at the entrance to my property. It was 6:30 in the morning, the sun barely cresting over the mountains, and the temperature was hovering at a brutal 15 degrees Fahrenheit. My breath fogged in front of my face as I parked my truck along the curb, dread settling in my stomach like a stone. My name is Daniel Prescott, and I had lived in the Meadowbrook Heights subdivision outside Boulder, Colorado for 3 years. The house was perfect, a 2-story cabin-style home nestled against the foothills with incredible mountain views. The property had one feature that made it absolutely irreplaceable for me: a private access trail that connected my backyard to the county maintenance road behind the development. That trail was the only way I could get my work equipment in and out of my property without driving through the neighborhood's winding streets. I worked as a freelance surveying contractor, which meant I had a trailer full of expensive equipment, theodolites, GPS receivers, and ground-penetrating radar units that I hauled to job sites across the state. The access trail had been there when I bought the house, clearly marked on the property survey, and the previous owner had used it for decades without issue. It was technically an easement that crossed a small strip of HOA common land before connecting to the county road. But now, as I jogged toward the commotion, I could see workers in high-visibility vests pouring concrete across the entire width of the trail. The mixer trucks rumbled and belched exhaust into the freezing air, and the fresh concrete steamed as it hit the frozen ground. "Hey, what the hell's going on?" I shouted, waving my arms as I approached. One of the workers, a burly guy with a thick beard, looked up from his work. "Just following orders, buddy. HOA contract. This is my access trail. You cannot pour concrete here." He shrugged and gestured toward a woman standing near a black Lexus SUV parked at the edge of the site. "Take it up with her. She is the one who hired us." I recognized her immediately, and my blood pressure spiked. Patricia Whitmore, the president of the Meadowbrook Heights HOA, stood with her arms crossed, wearing an expensive parka and designer boots that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her face had that pinched, self-satisfied expression that I had come to associate with our increasingly hostile encounters. "Patricia," I called out, my voice sharp, "what the hell do you think you are doing?" She turned to face me with a practiced smile that did not reach her eyes. "Daniel, good morning. I am simply ensuring that our community standards are maintained." "Community standards? This is my access easement. I have legal documentation that gives me the right to use this trail." "Actually," she said, pulling out a manila folder from her vehicle, "the HOA board voted last month to revoke all unauthorized access points to the county road. We have determined that your so-called easement violates our architectural guidelines and creates an unsightly entry point that diminishes property values." I stared at her in disbelief. "You cannot just revoke an easement. That is not how property law works. And you are doing this during a snow freeze? Do you have any idea what pouring concrete in this temperature does?" "We have proper cold weather additives," she said dismissively. "The contractors assured me it will set correctly." "That's not the point. You are blocking my only access to get my equipment out. I have a job starting Monday in Grand Junction. I need to get my trailer out today." Patricia's expression hardened. "You should have thought about that before you violated HOA regulations. Your trailer has been parked in your backyard for months, which is against our rules. No commercial vehicles or equipment visible from neighboring properties." "My backyard is completely fenced. Nobody can see it from anywhere except from the county road, which is outside HOA jurisdiction. The fence is only 6 feet tall. The trailer is 8 feet. Therefore, it is visible." She handed me a sheet of paper from her folder. "Here is the formal notice. The concrete barrier will remain, and you have 30 days to remove all commercial equipment from the property or face daily fines of $200. I took the paper with shaking hands, rage and panic warring inside me. "This is insane. I am calling my lawyer." "You do that," Patricia said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "In the meantime, I suggest you figure out how to comply with the rules like everyone else. This is a residential community, not a commercial storage facility." She climbed back into her Lexus and drove away, leaving me standing there as the workers continued pouring concrete. The trail was already half covered, the gray sludge spreading across the packed dirt and gravel that I had maintained for years. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures and videos, documenting everything. How thick are you pouring this? I asked the foreman. 6 inches per the contract, he replied, plus rebar. This thing is not going anywhere. 6 inches of reinforced concrete. Even if I won a legal battle, removing this would be a nightmare. The temperature was dropping, and I could see ice crystals forming on the surface of the wet concrete. This was going to be a disaster. I spent the rest of the morning on the phone with my lawyer, a sharp woman named Rachel Zimmerman who specialized in property law. She listened to my explanation while I emailed her photos of the scene. Daniel, this is pretty clear-cut, she said after reviewing everything. They cannot unilaterally revoke a recorded easement. If this access was part of your property deed and survey, which you have told me it was, then the HOA has just committed property trespass and potentially criminal mischief. So what do? The concrete is already poured. First, file a complaint with the county. This kind of work requires permits, especially if it is blocking an easement. Second, I will draft an emergency motion for a temporary restraining order and file it with the district court. We need to move fast, though. If that concrete fully cures, removing it will cost thousands. The workers said they used cold weather additives. How long until it sets? In this temperature, even with additives, probably 72 hours minimum for a full cure, but it will be hard enough to cause problems within 24 hours. I thanked her and immediately called the Boulder County Planning Department. It was Friday morning, and I prayed someone competent would be available. After being transferred 3 times, I finally reached an inspector named Gerald Hayes. "Mr. Prescott, let me pull up the property records," he said, his keyboard clicking in the background. "Okay, I see your easement here. It was established in 1987 when the subdivision was originally platted. That is a legal recorded access point. So the HOA cannot just block it off?" "Absolutely not. And if they poured concrete without a permit, which I am not seeing in our system, that is a violation of county code. How thick did you say the pour was?" 6 inches with rebar. Gerald let out a low whistle. "That is a structural installation, definitely needs a permit, and if it is blocking a legal easement, we can order it removed." "How long will that take?" "I can come out today to document the violation. Then we will send a stop work order and a notice of violation. If they do not voluntarily remove it, we can escalate to enforcement proceedings. But I am not going to lie to you, Mr. Prescott. The county legal process can take weeks." "I do not have weeks. I have work contracts that depend on getting my equipment out of here. Can you at least stop them from finishing the pour?" "They are still actively working?" "They were when I left 20 minutes ago." "Okay, I'm heading out there right now. Give me the exact address." I provided the information and then paced my living room, watching through the window as the concrete trucks finally pulled away. The damage was done. The entire trail, roughly 40 feet long and 12 feet wide, was now buried under a thick layer of concrete. The workers had even installed metal stakes along the edges and put up yellow caution tape. My wife, Zara Foster Prescott, came home from her nursing shift at Boulder Community Health around noon. She took one look at my face and immediately asked what was wrong. "Patricia and the HOA just concreted over my access trail," I said, my voice flat. Zara's eyes widened. "They what?" I showed her the photos and explained the entire situation. Zara had always been more diplomatic than me, often serving as the peacemaker when I got into conflicts with Patricia over various HOA nonsense. But even she looked furious as she scrolled through the images. This is beyond petty," she said. "This is deliberately destructive. They knew you needed that access. Patricia claims I violated HOA rules by having my trailer visible from neighboring properties. That is ridiculous. Our backyard is completely private. Nobody can see anything unless they are specifically looking from the county road, which is not even part of the HOA." "Try telling her that." Zara sat down heavily on the couch. "What did Rachel say?" "She is filing for an emergency restraining order, and the county inspector is coming out today to document the permit violation." "Permit violation? They poured 6 inches of reinforced concrete without getting county approval, and it is blocking a legal easement." "Good, let them deal with the consequences." Zara paused, then added, "But what about your Grand Junction job?" That was the question that had been eating at me all morning. The job was a 2-week surveying contract for a new housing development worth $30,000. I needed my equipment trailer, which was currently trapped in my backyard with no way to extract it except through the now blocked access trail. I do not know, I admitted. If I cannot get the trailer out, I will have to rent equipment in Grand Junction, which will eat most of my profit margin, and that is assuming I can even find rental gear on such short notice. My phone rang. It was Gerald Hayes from the county, the EDOFNI. Mr. Prescott, I am at your property now. This is definitely a code violation. They poured this without permits, and it is clearly blocking your legal easement. I am issuing a stop work order, though it looks like they are already finished, and a notice of violation. The HOA will have 10 days to respond. 10 days? That concrete will be fully cured by then. I understand your frustration, but that is our standard process. However, I am also recommending this to our legal department for expedited enforcement. Given that this is blocking legal access and was done without permits, they may be able to get a court order for immediate removal. How fast is expedited? Could be as soon as next week if the judge agrees it is an emergency. I thanked him and hung up, feeling defeated. Next week was not good enough. I had 3 days before I needed to be in Grand Junction with my equipment. Zara put her hand on my shoulder. Maybe you could back the trailer through the side yard. I'd already considered that. The gate is only 8 feet wide. The trailer is 8.5 feet, and even if I could squeeze it through, I would have to tear out the fence and drive across the Hendersons' yard to reach the street. I do not think they would appreciate that. What if you explain the situation? Maybe, but their yard is landscaped. I would destroy their grass and probably crack their driveway with the weight of the trailer. We sat in frustrated silence for a while, and then Zara said, "What about just taking the equipment out piece by piece, load it into your truck and reassemble everything in Grand Junction?" It was not a terrible idea, but it would be a logistical nightmare. Some of my equipment was extremely sensitive and required specific mounting configurations. Disassembling and reassembling everything would take days and risk damaging precision instruments. "That is a last resort," I said. "Let me see what Rachel can do with the restraining order first." The weekend was torture. The temperature stayed below freezing, which meant the concrete was curing slowly but steadily. I walked out to inspect it several times, hoping to find some weakness or flaw, but the pour had been professional. The surface was smooth and level, and the rebar was positioned perfectly to provide maximum strength. On Saturday afternoon, my neighbor from across the street, Marcus Chen, came over. Marcus was a software engineer who worked from home, and he had witnessed the entire concrete pour from his office window. "Daniel, I cannot believe they actually did this," he said, shaking his head. "I watched the whole thing. Patricia was out there supervising like some kind of dictator." "Did you happen to record any of it?" "Actually, yes. My security camera faces the street, and it caught most of the action. I can send you the footage if you want." "That would be incredibly helpful. My lawyer might need it." Marcus sent me the files that evening, and I forwarded them to Rachel. The footage showed Patricia directing the workers, pointing at specific locations, and even having them extend the concrete pour several feet beyond the original trail boundaries to ensure I could not simply drive around it. Sunday morning, Rachel called with an update. "The judge reviewed our motion, and she is sympathetic, but she wants a full hearing before issuing a restraining order. The earliest available date is Tuesday morning." "Tuesday? My job starts Monday." "I know, Daniel, and I explained that to the clerk, but the judge is not available tomorrow, and this is technically a civil matter, not criminal, so it does not qualify for emergency weekend intervention." I wanted to scream. Instead, I took a deep breath and said, "Okay, what are my options?" "You could try to negotiate directly with the HOA, offer to cover the cost of removing the concrete yourself if they will agree not to fight the restraining order." "Patricia will never go for that. She wants me gone." "Then you might have to bite the bullet and rent equipment for the Grand Junction job. I know it is not ideal, but we can sue for damages later. The HOA will be liable for your financial losses." Later does not help me now. I understand, but sometimes these situations require short-term sacrifice for long-term victory. I spent Sunday afternoon calling equipment rental companies in Grand Junction. Most were closed, but I finally found one that had some of what I needed. The rental cost was going to be $4,000 for 2 weeks, which turned my profitable job into barely breaking even. But it was better than defaulting on the contract. Monday morning, I loaded up my truck with the few pieces of equipment I could carry and started the 4-hour drive to Grand Junction. Zara had offered to come with me, but she had critical shifts at the hospital and could not take time off. We agreed she would handle the court hearing on Tuesday and keep me updated. The Grand Junction job was exactly as miserable as I had expected. The rental equipment was older and less accurate than my own gear, which meant everything took twice as long. I spent 12-hour days in freezing temperatures, trying to maintain my professional reputation while seething about the situation back home. Tuesday morning, Zara called me from the courthouse. The judge issued the restraining order. The HOA has to remove the concrete within 48 hours or they will be in contempt of court. Seriously? That is amazing. Rachel was incredible. She presented all the evidence, including Marcus's security footage and the county inspector's report. The judge was not happy that the HOA poured concrete without permits during a freeze. She called it reckless and potentially dangerous. So they have to jackhammer it all out? Yes, and they have to pay for it. The judge ordered them to restore the easement to its original condition at their expense. I could not help but smile. I wish I could be there to watch. Oh, you will be. Rachel arranged for the county to document the removal process. They will send you photos and reports. The next 2 days crawled by as I worked the Grand Junction job and waited for updates from home. Zara sent me text messages with photos of a demolition crew showing up at our property with jackhammers and a small excavator. The noise was apparently deafening, echoing through the neighborhood and driving everyone crazy. Marcus sent me his own photos, showing Patricia standing near her Lexus, looking absolutely livid as workers tore up the concrete she had just paid to install. According to Marcus, she kept arguing with the demolition foreman, insisting there had been some kind of mistake, until he showed her the court order and threatened to call the police if she interfered. The removal took 2 full days. The concrete had cured enough to be extremely difficult to break apart, and the rebar made it even worse. The workers had to use heavy equipment to pull out chunks of reinforced concrete, and in the process, they tore up a significant portion of the surrounding ground. By Thursday evening, the trail was clear again, though it looked like a war zone. The demolition had left deep gouges in the earth, and the edges of the HOA common land were torn up from the excavator treads. Gerald Hayes, the county inspector, came out to verify the work and sent me a detailed report. "Mr. Prescott, the easement is now accessible," he wrote. "However, significant restoration work is required to return the area to its original condition. The court order specifies that the HOA must complete this restoration, including regrading, compacting, and surfacing the trail with the same gravel material that was there previously." I forwarded the report to Rachel, who immediately sent a follow-up demand to the HOA board. Patricia responded through the HOA's lawyer, claiming that the concrete had been removed as ordered and that any additional restoration was beyond the scope of the court's mandate. Rachel disagreed and filed another motion, this time requesting that the court clarify the restoration requirements and award me damages for the rental equipment costs and lost time. The hearing was scheduled for the following week, after I returned from Grand Junction. The 2 weeks in Grand Junction were grueling, but I completed the job despite the equipment challenges. The client was satisfied, and I got paid, though my profit margin was barely 15% instead of the 40% I had anticipated. Every time I thought about that lost income, I felt a fresh wave of anger at Patricia and her petty power games. When I finally got home, exhausted and road-weary, Zara greeted me with a hug and a glass of bourbon. "Welcome back. You need to see the trail." We walked out to the backyard together, and I surveyed the damage. The concrete was gone, but the access trail looked terrible. The ground was uneven, with huge ruts and piles of broken concrete fragments scattered along the edges. It was technically passable, but driving my heavy trailer over it would be risky. "The HOA was supposed to restore this," I said. "They claim they did. They had someone spread some gravel in the worst spots, but it is not even close to how it was before." I took more photos and sent them to Rachel with a detailed description of the inadequate restoration work. She added it to our damages claim, which now included rental equipment costs, lost profit, my time spent dealing with the situation, and the cost of properly restoring the trail. The court hearing the following Tuesday was tense. Patricia showed up with the HOA's lawyer, a slick guy in an expensive suit who tried to argue that the HOA had fully complied with the court order by removing the concrete. Rachel destroyed that argument with photos showing the current state of the trail compared to its condition before the concrete pour. She also presented my financial records showing the rental costs and reduced profit margin from the Grand Junction job. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s named Judge Marianne Keller, listened to both sides and then made her ruling. It is clear to me that the HOA acted improperly in blocking Mr. Prescott's legal easement, she said. The removal of the concrete was necessary but insufficient. The court orders the HOA to hire a professional contractor to fully restore the access trail to its original condition, as verified by the county inspector, within 30 days. Additionally, the HOA is liable for Mr. Prescott's documented financial losses resulting from this incident. She awarded me $8,000 in damages, covering the rental costs, lost profit, and my time. It was not everything I had requested, but it was fair. Patricia's face was red as we left the courtroom. She turned to me in the hallway and hissed, "This is not over. You are still in violation of the HOA rules regarding commercial vehicles." "My lawyer would be happy to discuss that with you," I said calmly, "but you might want to actually read the rules first. There is nothing prohibiting commercial vehicles on private property that are not visible from the street or neighboring homes. Your trailer is visible from the county road, which is outside HOA jurisdiction. My property survey was done by a licensed surveyor. Good luck arguing with professional measurements." She stormed off, and Rachel pulled me aside. "Be careful, Daniel. She is angry and embarrassed. People like that tend to escalate." "What more can she do? The court ruled in my favor." "She can make your life difficult in other ways. HOA presidents have a lot of petty power. Just watch your back." Rachel was right to warn me. Over the next few weeks, I received a flurry of violation notices from the HOA. My grass was allegedly too long, even though it was winter and nothing was growing. My holiday lights were supposedly too bright, despite being the same ones I had used for years. My mailbox needed repainting, my fence needed staining, and on and on. Each violation came with a threat of fines if not corrected within a specified time frame. It was clearly harassment, and I documented everything. Rachel sent a cease and desist letter to the HOA, warning them that their pattern of retaliatory enforcement could result in further legal action. The harassment stopped temporarily, but Patricia found another angle to attack. In early February, I received a notice that the HOA was conducting a special assessment to cover the costs of the concrete removal and my damage award. Every homeowner in the subdivision would be charged a one-time fee of $400. The notice included a passive-aggressive explanation that the assessment was necessary because one homeowner's frivolous legal action had depleted the HOA's reserve fund. It did not name me specifically, but everyone in the neighborhood knew who it was referring to. My mailbox started receiving anonymous angry notes. Someone left a bag of dog feces on my porch. The Hendersons, my neighbors to the east, stopped waving when they saw me. It was clear that Patricia had successfully turned much of the neighborhood against me. Zara was upset by the hostility. "This is getting out of hand," she said one evening after finding another nasty note on our car. "Maybe we should just move." "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "I did nothing wrong. Patricia broke the law, and she is trying to punish me for holding her accountable. I am not letting her win." "But is it worth all this stress? You are angry all the time, and I'm worried about our safety." That stopped me cold. I had not considered that the harassment could escalate to something dangerous. "Do you really think someone would hurt us?" "I do not know, but people are angry about paying $400, and they blame you instead of Patricia. Some of them might do something stupid." I installed security cameras around our property the next day. 4 high-definition units covering all angles. If anyone tried anything, I would have evidence. The trail restoration was completed in mid-February by a professional grading company. Gerald Hayes inspected the work and declared it satisfactory, and I was finally able to use the access again without worrying about damaging my trailer. The whole ordeal had cost the HOA over $20,000 in total, between the original concrete pour, the removal, the restoration, and my damage award. At the next HOA board meeting, which I attended specifically to watch the fireworks, several homeowners demanded Patricia's resignation. Marcus Chen was particularly vocal. "This entire disaster was caused by your personal vendetta against Daniel Prescott," Marcus said, standing up during the public comment period. "You wasted HOA funds on an illegal action, and now we are all paying for it. You should resign immediately." Patricia's face was stone. "I was acting in the best interests of the community. Mr. Prescott was violating HOA rules, and I took appropriate action." "Appropriate action would have been sending him a notice and working toward a reasonable solution," Marcus shot back. "Instead, you poured concrete over a legal easement without permits during a snow freeze. The judge called your actions reckless. How is that in the community's best interests?" Other homeowners chimed in, and the meeting devolved into a shouting match. Patricia eventually banged her gavel and called for order, but the damage was done. A petition started circulating to hold a special election to remove her from the board. I stayed quiet during all of this, letting the other homeowners speak for themselves. I had made my points in court, and I did not need to add fuel to the fire. But I did sign the petition when it came around. The special election was scheduled for March. Patricia campaigned hard to keep her position, sending out emails and door-knocking to remind everyone of the various improvements she had overseen during her tenure. But the concrete incident had destroyed her credibility, and the $400 assessment had made her genuinely unpopular. On election night, held in the community clubhouse, Patricia lost her board seat by a landslide. Out of 120 homeowners who voted, only 23 voted to keep her. She did not even stay for the final count, leaving halfway through as the results became obvious. The new board president was a retired teacher named Dorothy Simmons, a reasonable woman who immediately reached out to me to apologize for Patricia's actions and promise a fresh start. She also announced that the board would be reviewing all HOA rules and enforcement procedures to prevent future abuses. "We are a community, not a dictatorship," Dorothy said at her first meeting as president. "Our rules should serve the homeowners, not the other way around." It was a refreshing change. Over the next few months, the tension in the neighborhood gradually eased, the anonymous harassment stopped, and people started treating me normally again. The Hendersons even apologized for their coldness, explaining that they had been upset about the assessment, but realized it was not my fault. Zara was relieved that things were returning to normal. "Maybe we can actually enjoy living here now," she said. I hoped she was right. But I kept the security cameras running, just in case. And in April, I got a surprise call from Gerald Hayes at the county. "Mr. Prescott, I wanted to give you a heads up about something. We completed our full investigation into the concrete pour incident, and we are referring the case to the district attorney's office." "The DA? Why?" "Because pouring concrete without permits is a misdemeanor under county code, and doing it in a way that blocks a legal easement could be considered criminal mischief. The DA wants to review whether charges should be filed." "Against the HOA?" "Against Patricia Whitmore specifically. She was the one who contracted the work and directed it to be done. The concrete company has cooperated with our investigation and provided copies of all communications. It is pretty clear that Ms. Whitmore knew she was supposed to get permits, but chose not to because she wanted the work done quickly before you could object." This was an unexpected development. What kind of charges are we talking about? Probably misdemeanor criminal mischief in violation of building codes. She could face fines or even jail time, depending on how the DA wants to proceed. Part of me felt vindicated, but another part was uncomfortable with the idea of Patricia facing criminal charges. As much as I disliked her, I had not set out to get her arrested. "What happens now?" I asked. "The DA will review the case and decide whether to file charges. If they do, Ms. Whitmore will be notified and given a chance to respond. It is out of my hands at this point." I thanked him for the information and told Zara about it that evening. She had mixed feelings, too. "She did break the law," Zara said, "but criminal charges seem harsh for an HOA dispute." "It stopped being just an HOA dispute when she poured concrete over a legal easement without permits," I pointed out. "If I had done something like that to her property, I would be facing charges too. I suppose you are right. It just feels like things keep escalating. That is Patricia's fault, not mine. I just want to live my life and run my business. She is the one who keeps pushing boundaries. In May, the district attorney's office filed charges against Patricia Whitmore for misdemeanor criminal mischief and 2 counts of building code violations. The news spread through the neighborhood like wildfire, and opinions were divided. Some people thought she deserved it for her reckless actions, while others felt it was an overreach by the county. Patricia hired a criminal defense attorney and fought the charges aggressively. Her lawyer argued that she had relied on the concrete company to handle permits and had not knowingly violated any laws. The concrete company, however, produced emails showing that Patricia had specifically told them not to worry about permits because it was HOA property and they had authority to do whatever they wanted. That lie destroyed her defense. The emails made it clear that Patricia had known permits were required, but had deliberately circumvented the process. Her lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the DA was not interested in going easy on her. The trial was scheduled for July, and I was called as a witness. I testified about the easement, the impact on my business, and the entire timeline of events. The prosecutor also called Gerald Hayes and the foreman from the concrete company, both of whom corroborated the permit violations and Patricia's direct involvement. Patricia's defense was weak. Her lawyer tried to argue that she had been acting in good faith to enforce HOA rules, but the judge was not buying it. The recorded easement and the lack of permits were undeniable facts. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Patricia sat stone-faced as the judge read the verdicts, her expensive lawyer looking deflated beside her. At sentencing 2 weeks later, the judge was stern. "Ms. Whitmore, you held a position of trust within your community, and you abused that trust to pursue a personal vendetta against Mr. Prescott. Your actions were reckless, illegal, and costly. You wasted HOA funds, inconvenienced your neighbors, and disrupted Mr. Prescott's business, all because you did not like the fact that he had a legal easement on his property." The judge sentenced Patricia to 90 days in jail, suspended pending 1 year of probation, 200 hours of community service, and a $5,000 fine. She was also ordered to pay restitution to the county for the costs of the investigation and enforcement proceedings. Patricia looked shaken as she left the courtroom. Her reign as HOA dictator was definitively over, and she now had a criminal record to show for it. The neighborhood reaction was subdued. Most people were just glad the whole mess was finally resolved. Dorothy Simmons, the new HOA president, sent out a community email emphasizing that the board had cooperated fully with the investigation and that new policies were in place to prevent any similar incidents in the future. Life gradually returned to normal. I continued running my surveying business, using my access trail whenever I needed to move equipment. The trail itself had been restored beautifully by the professional grading company, and it was actually in better condition now than it had been before Patricia's concrete adventure. Zara and I started enjoying our home again, hosting barbecues and getting to know our neighbors better. Marcus Chen became a good friend, and we often grabbed beers together and laughed about the absurdity of the whole situation. "You know what the craziest part is?" Marcus said one evening as we sat on my back deck, watching the sun set over the mountains. "Patricia could have just left you alone. You were not hurting anyone. Your trailer was not visible from anywhere that mattered. She created this entire disaster for no reason." "Some people just cannot help themselves," I said. "They get a little bit of power and they let it go to their head." "Well, at least Dorothy is running things now. She actually listens to people." That is all I ever wanted. Just someone reasonable who follows the actual rules instead of making up new ones to suit their personal preferences. Marcus raised his beer. "Here is to reasonable HOA boards." We clinked bottles, and I felt genuinely content for the first time in months. The fight had been exhausting and expensive, but it had been worth it to establish the principle that HOA boards cannot just do whatever they want. There are laws and property rights, and even homeowners associations have to respect them. The following week, I got a handwritten letter in the mail from Patricia. It was brief and clearly written under the advice of her lawyer as part of her probation requirements. "Mr. Prescott, I am writing to apologize for my actions regarding the concrete pour on your access easement. My behavior was inappropriate, and caused you significant inconvenience and financial harm. I should have worked with you to find a reasonable solution instead of taking unilateral action. I hope you can accept this apology. Sincerely, Patricia Whitmore. The apology was stiff and legalistic, but I appreciated it nonetheless. I showed it to Zara, who read it and handed it back. "Are you going to respond?" she asked. "I do not think so. She said what she needed to say, and I have nothing to add. The whole thing is over, and I just want to move on." Fair enough. I filed the letter away in my folder of documents from the incident, which had grown thick over the months. Hopefully, I would never need to look at any of it again. Summer turned to fall, and I stayed busy with surveying contracts across Colorado and Wyoming. The access trail worked perfectly, allowing me to move my equipment in and out without any issues. Every time I used it, I thought about how close I had come to losing it permanently if that concrete had been allowed to stand. In October, I ran into Patricia at the grocery store. It was the first time I had seen her since the sentencing, and she looked different. Her hair was no longer perfectly styled, and she was dressed casually in jeans and a sweater instead of her usual expensive outfits. She saw me in the produce section and froze, clearly debating whether to acknowledge me or pretend she had not noticed. I decided to be the bigger person and nodded politely. "Patricia." "Daniel," she said quietly. "How are you?" "Good. Staying busy with work. You?" "I'm doing okay. Finishing my community service hours. I've been volunteering at the food bank." "That is good." There was an awkward pause, and then Patricia said, "I really am sorry about everything. I know my letter probably seemed insincere, but I genuinely regret how I handled the situation. I let my ego get in the way of common sense." This apology seemed more genuine than the written one. "I appreciate you saying that. It was a rough time for everyone. I heard you and Zara are doing well. That is good. You have a nice home." "Thanks, it means a lot to us." We made some more awkward small talk, and then Patricia excused herself and hurried away with her cart. I felt a strange sense of closure. The anger and resentment I had carried for months had faded, replaced by something closer to pity. Patricia had destroyed her reputation, acquired a criminal record, and lost her position of power, all because she could not handle the fact that I had a legal right to use my access trail. When I got home and told Zara about the encounter, she was thoughtful. "Do you think she learned anything from all this?" "I hope so. She seemed humbled at least. But who knows? Some people never change." "Well, at least she's not running the HOA anymore. That is the important thing." Over the following months, life in Meadowbrook Heights continued peacefully under Dorothy's leadership. The HOA focused on actual community improvements rather than petty enforcement actions. They repaved the subdivision roads, upgraded the playground equipment, and organized neighborhood social events that people actually wanted to attend. I served on the Architectural Review Committee for a while, helping to streamline the approval process for home improvements. Dorothy appreciated having someone with surveying and construction knowledge on the committee, and I enjoyed contributing to the community in a positive way. My business thrived. Word had gotten around about my legal victory over the HOA, and I gained several new clients who respected the fact that I stood up for my rights. The story became a bit of a legend in local property law circles, and Rachel Zimmerman even used it as a case study in a seminar about easement disputes. One evening in December, almost a full year after the concrete incident, Zara and I were sitting by our fireplace when she said, "You know, I am glad we did not move." "Yeah? Yeah, this is our home. We should not have to run away just because one person was being unreasonable. And look how things turned out. Patricia is gone, Dorothy is great, and we have good relationships with our neighbors now." I pulled her close. "You're right. It was worth fighting for." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire crackle and listening to the wind howl outside. Snow was falling heavily, covering the mountains and the subdivision in a thick white blanket. The access trail in our backyard was buried under several inches of powder, but I knew it would still be there when I needed it, solid and legal and mine. The whole ordeal had taught me important lessons about standing up for yourself, the importance of documentation, and the value of good legal representation. It had also shown me that even in the face of petty tyranny, justice could prevail if you were willing to fight for it. More importantly, It had brought Zara and me closer together. We had weathered the storm as a team, supporting each other through the stress and uncertainty. Our marriage was stronger for it, and our home felt more truly ours than ever before. As we headed to bed that night, I took one last look out the window at the snow-covered backyard. The access trail was invisible beneath the white blanket, but I knew exactly where it was. And I knew that no HOA board, no matter how unreasonable, would ever be able to take it away from me again. The county had made them jackhammer it all out once, and that precedent was now established. My easement was protected by law, by court order, and by the collective memory of a neighborhood that had learned the hard way what happens when HOA power goes unchecked. I smiled to myself and climbed into bed next to Zara, feeling genuinely grateful for everything we had. Our home, our rights, our community, and our future together. Patricia's concrete barrier had been nothing more than a temporary obstacle, destroyed as surely as her reign of petty tyranny. And in the end, that was exactly as it should be. Justice had been served, one jackhammer blow at a time. The spring came early that year, melting the snow and revealing the access trail in all its restored glory. I started the season with a major contract surveying land for a new solar farm outside Fort Collins, and I used my trail dozens of times without incident. Each time I drove my trailer across that gravel path, I felt a deep satisfaction knowing that I had fought for it and won. Marcus and I occasionally joked about writing a book called HOA Horror Stories and making the concrete incident the centerpiece. We never actually did it, but the idea amused us during our regular deck sessions. Dorothy Simmons proved to be an excellent HOA president, serving 2 terms before stepping down to spend more time with her grandchildren. Her successor was a retired accountant named Robert Finch, who maintained Dorothy's reasonable, community-focused approach. The Meadowbrook Heights HOA became known in the area as one of the good ones, a place where rules were fair and fairly enforced. As for Patricia Whitmore, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had moved to Arizona after her probation ended. Apparently, the social stigma of the criminal conviction and the neighborhood backlash had been too much for her. She sold her house quietly and left without saying goodbye to anyone. I felt no satisfaction in her departure, only relief that the chapter was finally, truly closed. She had learned an expensive lesson about the limits of HOA authority, and I had learned valuable lessons about property rights and the importance of standing your ground. Years later, when people asked me about the incident, I would tell them the whole story, emphasizing the importance of documenting everything, hiring good legal representation, and knowing your rights. Many homeowners live in fear of their HOAs, convinced that the boards have unlimited power to make their lives miserable. My story proved that was not true. HOAs are bound by the same laws as everyone else, and when they overstep, they can and should be held accountable. The access trail remained a vital part of my business operations for as long as I owned the house. Every survey job, every equipment haul, every trip up and down that gravel path was a reminder of what I had fought for and won. It was more than just a convenient route for my trailer. It was a symbol of property rights, personal determination, and the principle that even the smallest homeowner can stand up to institutional overreach and emerge victorious. That, in the end, was the real story. Was the real. Not just about concrete and jackhammers and legal battles, but about refusing to be bullied, knowing your rights, and fighting for what is rightfully yours. The trail was mine, legally and morally, and no amount of concrete or HOA intimidation could change that fundamental truth. And every time I drove my trailer across that restored gravel path, wheels crunching on the stones that had been laid down at the HOA's expense after their illegal barrier was demolished, I was reminded that justice, though sometimes slow and expensive, does eventually prevail. The mountains watched over us, silent and eternal, as life in Meadowbrook Heights continued in peace and relative harmony. The community had learned its lesson. I had protected my rights, and the access trail remained open and available, just as it always should have been. That was enough. That was everything.